Okay, it is New Year's, about 5-10 minutes before 8 o'clock in the evening. We're looking at, ideally, NGC550-599. Now it's pushed off way over to here, so I am going to align to it to synchronize the scope. I can see the dark bar across the core. I'm hoping you can see it as well. Not a bad view. I've noticed that I can actually make out the Milky Way overhead in Cepheus and Cassiopeia. So I would describe this as a marginal night of seeing, and we should be able to see galaxies down to 15.5 or maybe even 16 when they are near the zenith. So let me go ahead and recenter the scope because we are now west facing. We have equatorial flipped. Okay, I've resynchronized the scope and using the coordinates of NGC550-599. You're seeing it on the screen here. It will take a while to give the best view possible under the circumstances, but from what I'm seeing on the screen, we're getting a pretty decent view. I wouldn't say a perfect view, but a fairly decent view of a beautiful edge-on NGC591 galaxy on the border of Andromeda and Perseus. Took about 45 minutes for the camera to charge up. It's fairly cold out, so I don't expect to get as much longevity out of the camera as usual, but I think we are definitely going to have a decent night of no moon, high thin atmospheric water vapor, 4.5 to 5.0 star magnitudes overhead, with reasonable amount of stability. There's not much wind, but it is pretty chilly. I'd say somewhere around 25 degrees out. Let's head off to NGC 550 for the 550 to 599 series. I did take a sneak preview of NGC 550 Galaxy and Cetus just before we knocked off the NGC 500 to 549 series earlier this evening. It's a very nice galaxy. It's magnitude 12.7, 1.4 by 0.6 arc minutes. For some reason it's drifted off to the left over here, but it's still in a good part of the screen. This galaxy is spiral with a lowercase a, 261 million light years distant, puts it about the size of our own Milky Way, about 100,000 light years, although I learned in recent research that they have rescaled the Milky Way to about 87,000 light years in diameter, although they have determined its mass is greater than of the 150,000 light year in diameter Messier 31. It's co-regent in the local group of galaxies. Now we'll push on to NGC 551. Not a bad view. We may be getting a little bit of aperture block, but not bad. We're at plus 37 degrees and change for NGC 551. Galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 12.7, 1.8 by 0.8 arc minute aspected. Spiral with a bar, lowercase bc, 237 million light years distant, puts this one probably about 120,000 light years in diameter. We are at plus 37 degrees, 10 minutes, 57 seconds, with a right ascension of 1 hour, 27 and 40. Galaxy is quite present on the screen towards the center. We are now fishing for a 15.1 magnitude NGC 553 galaxy in Pisces. We're at plus 33.5 degrees. I don't think we're getting any aperture block, but it's getting close as everything is now drifting west. So this is a 15.1 magnitude, 0.6 by 0.3 arc minute, obliquely presented lenticular spiral, 224 million light years distant. Should be present somewhere on the screen, but I really can't determine it. It's 15.1 magnitude. I have yet to be able to settle in on where things should appear, as now the scope has been equatorially flipped to the west. Let's see if we can track down NGC 554 Galaxy in Cetus. Magnitude 15.9 by 0.5 arc minute size lenticular spiral, 436 million light years distant, probably puts it about 130,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus almost 23 degrees. We're now beginning to hear some fireworks going on to celebrate the advent of the new year, 2024, here in Grant County, Eastern Oregon. NGC555 is very close to NGC554, that galaxy in Cetus. This one's a little brighter, magnitude 14.1, 0.7 by 0.6 arc minutes, a spiral with a bar of the lenticular class, and it has an A designation plus a ring, 457 million light years distant, puts it at about 100,000 light years in diameter. We're at almost minus 23 degrees. I'm hoping we will be able to identify both 554 and NGC 555 on the morrow. I would venture to say that NGC 556 is in the same field with 554 and 555. Another galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 14.4, very small, 0.4 by 0.3 arc minutes, lenticular spiral, 428 million light years distant. Puts this one at probably about 70,000 light years in diameter. We've now headed north in Cetus, almost up to the celestial equator, about minus 1.5 degrees in declination for NGC 557, magnitude 13.5, 1.4 by 0.8 arc minutes, spiral with a bar, lenticular class A, 246 million light years distant. And I do believe I am seeing the galaxy with my gloved hand right about there on the screen, although we'll have to confirm that on the manana. NGC 558 was only a couple of ticks from NGC 557. Galaxy in Cetus, of course, magnitude 14.3, smallish, 0.4 by 0.2 arc minute elliptical, 222 million light years distant. Probably about 35,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus almost 2 degrees in declination, although we're at right ascension 1 hour, 27 minutes, and 16 seconds. And there is a galaxy quite right there on the screen, which is likely to be NGC 558. NGC 559 was an open cluster in Cassiopeia. And then NGC 560 ended up being a galaxy very close to 558, maybe on the same screen. This is a magnitude 13 galaxy, 1.9 by 0.6 arc minutes in size, so nicely presented spiral of the lenticular class O, 247 million light years distant, puts it at about the size of Messier 31 at 150,000 light years. We're at minus almost 2 degrees in declination. Heading up north to NGC 561, a galaxy in Andromeda, brightish, magnitude 12.9, about the right size, maybe a little small for that magnitude, 1.6 by 1.5 arc minutes, spiral with a bar, 211 million light years distant. We have no obstruction of the scope. We're at 34 degrees and change in declination. However, at 48 degrees north, we're probably only getting 40% of the aperture on NGC 562, galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 13.3, 1.3 by 1.1 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a lowercase c. 458 million light years distant, means it's larger than Messier 31 at about 170,000 light years. As mentioned, we are at 48 and almost 0.5 degrees in declination. Shouldn't get much of a view of this one. And frankly, I'm not even seeing any stars. Oh well, but at least we got the data. Heading south now to NGC 563, a galaxy in Cetus. It's also NGC 539, so we should have recorded this one earlier in the evening. Be interesting to compare them. It's magnitude 13.5, 1.6 by 1.3 arc minutes. Spiral with a bar, lowercase c, 431 million light years distant. Means this is about 170,000 or so light years in diameter. We're at minus 18 and change degrees in declination. Hopefully we're getting some kind of a view. To the north now to NGC 564, another galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 12.5, 1.3 by 1.1 arc minutes. An elliptical class 2, which means it's football shaped, 261 million light years distant, and we're at minus almost 2 degrees in declination. And because it's an elliptical, it should be fairly well spread out in its light, since ellipticals are fairly mature galaxies, almost globular-esque in their nature, although they can be rather distended from an E0 to an E8 classification. Not too far from 564 is NGC565, Galaxy in Cetus. Shouldn't be on the same screen, however. It's a magnitude 13.5, but it's got a nice aspect ratio, 1.3 by 0.4 arc minutes. Spiral with a lowercase a, 201 million light years distance, probably about 75 to 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus 1 and change declination, and the galaxy is quite present on the screen right over there. Heading north again, we're at NGC 566, Galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 13.5, nice aspect ratio, 1.6 to 0.4, very close to an edge on, but this one's a spiral lenticular class, 247 million light years distant, puts it about 110,000 light years across. We are at plus 32 degrees and change, but not getting any aperture block. NGC 567 is another galaxy in Cetus, but it's fairly far south, minus 10 and change degrees. Magnitude 14, 1 by 0.6, spiral lenticular class, 310 million light years distant, puts it about the size of our own Milky Way. We're, as I mentioned, at minus 10 degrees. Faintly see the galaxy on the screen. There's a little bit of an edge-on appearance to it right about there. NGC 569 is a galaxy in Pisces, magnitude 13.6, perfectly oblate, 1 by 0.5 arc minute, spiral with a lowercase b/c, 259 million light years distance, probably about 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 11 degrees. We are now probably some 10 degrees west of culminating, so we're starting to lose the views here a little bit, folks. And we'll be running into the roof with anything more than 32 or 3 degrees in terms of northern declination. Got to keep moving on. NGC 570 is another galaxy in Cetus, brightish, magnitude 12.8, football shape, 1.6 by 1.3 arc minute, spiral with a bar, 246 million light years distant, puts it a little larger than our own Milky Way. The old figure, so it's probably about 110,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus almost 1 degree in declination, and we're beginning to approach the right ascension hour 1 and 30 minute. Okay, NGC 571 is a galaxy in Pisces. We're getting close, we're probably getting a little nominal aperture block now at plus 32.5 degrees. Magnitude 13.6, galaxy 1.3 by 1.3, face-on, spiral with some peculiarities, 212 million light years distant. NGC 571. NGC 575 is a galaxy in Pisces. We had to skip one in Andromeda and one in Sculptor, the too far north and too far south for the current progression of the sidereal clock. 575 is a magnitude 12.8, 1.7 by 1.6 arc minute spiral with a bar, lowercase c, 142 million light years distant, which means it's probably about 110,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 21.5 degrees. The galaxy is quite present. It's giving a decent view, possibly even that bar off in the screen over here with some aura of nebulosity around it. With NGC 577, we were already about 25 minutes into our tour of the 550 to 599s. NGC 577 is a galaxy in Cetus. It's also NGC 580, magnitude 12.9, 1.9 by 1.5 arc minute, spiral with a bar and a lowercase a, 266 million light years distant, means this was probably a little bit larger than Messier 31, maybe 160,000 light years in diameter. We are at minus almost 2 degrees in declination. The galaxy is quite obviously present. NGC578 is a deep south galaxy, but in Cetus, minus 22.5 degrees roughly. Brightish, magnitude 10.9, largest 4.8 by 3 arc minutes. Spiral with a bar, lowercase c. 73 million light years distant, means it's probably around 80,000 light years in diameter. We are at minus 22 and over a half degrees in declination. I hope this galaxy gives some kind of a thumbprint on the screen. It is pretty far south, however. I do see some faint fuzziness at my viewing angle. So the galaxy is visible. We have now entered into Triangulum with NGC579. No, it is not Messier 33. This galaxy is magnitude 13.3, 1.1 by 1 arc minute, spiral with a lowercase c. 225 million light years distant, probably about 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 33.5 degrees. I do not believe we're getting any obstruction of the aperture, and the galaxy is quite apparent right at that point. Not a bad view, 13.3 magnitude. Okay, we've skipped over 580, which was also earlier, I think it was 578 or something. To NGC 582, another galaxy in Triangulum. Once again, not the Triangulum galaxy. NGC 582 is a galaxy in Triangulum, magnitude 13.2. Very nicely aspected, 2.2 by 0.6 arc minutes. Pretty close to an edge-on, spiral with a bar and a lowercase b. 197 million light years distant. Probably about 115,000 light years in diameter. We are at plus 33.5 degrees. And we may be getting just a tiny amount of aperture block from the roof tri, but the galaxy is quite visible on the screen, easy to make out because of its aspect ratio. And another galaxy further up here as well, which may be the previous Triangulum galaxy. Heading south again into Cetus, the whale. NGC 583 is a galaxy, magnitude 14.1, smallish, 0.7 by 0.6 arc minutes, spiral with a bar, lenticular class, 312 million light years distant, probably about 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus 18 and change in declination. I do believe I see the galaxy on the screen. It is core. It's pretty bright because it's so condensed at 0.7 by 0.6 arc minutes. NGC 584 should give a very nice presentation for a galaxy in Cetus. It's magnitude 10.5, 3.3 by 1.9 arc minutes inside. It's an elliptical class 4, which means a distended football shape, but almost globular-esque galaxy. 85 million light years distant puts this at about 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus almost 7 degrees in declination. That galaxy is quite intense, although smallish, with an aura of fading light around its ellipticity. NGC 585 should be a fairly impressive galaxy, easily picked out in Cetus. It's magnitude 13.1, but its aspect ratio is pretty close to edge-on, 2.2 by 0.5 arc minute, spiral with a lowercase a. 245 million light years distant puts this baby at about 160,000 light years in diameter. However, we are at minus 1 degree. The galaxy is quite obvious, however, on the screen, although not nearly as intense as NGC 584, the preceding view. Well, just had a bit of a runaway situation. It typically happens when I'm facing, the scope is oriented to the east, but that happened at this occasion when it's oriented to the west. We're looking for NGC 586, a galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 13.2, oblitely presented 1.7 by 0.9 arc minute, spiral with a lowercase a, 85 million light years distant, probably means it's about 60,000 light years in diameter. We are at minus 6 degrees. There's a very bright galaxy there and a fainter one down below in the usual location. Back up into Triangulum for NGC 587. We are getting some aperture block here because we're at plus 35 degrees. This NGC587 is a 12.8 magnitude galaxy, well aspected at 2.2 by 0.8 arc-minute spiral with a bar and lowercase b. 207 million light years distant means it's probably about 140,000 light years in diameter. We are now at hour 1 and 32 minutes and 33 seconds with a declination of 35 degrees, 21 minutes and 30 seconds. And the galaxy is quite present on the screen despite a little bit of aperture block. Okay, here is going to be an intriguing nebulosity in Triangulum. It's in NGC 588. It's within Messier 33. It's only 0.7 arc-minutes in size. It's considered elliptical for whatever reason. 2.8 million light years distant. We're at plus 30.5 degrees in declination, which means if we hurry, we may be able to vision all of Messier 33 without aperture block. Let's see if it falls in to the 550 to 599 series as an NGC designate. Dropping back down into Cetus for NGC 589 Galaxy. 14th magnitude, football shape 1.1 by 0.9 arc-minute, so it's a perfect 14 magnitude average surface brightness galaxy, 236 million light years distant. We are at minus 12 degrees, so we're losing at least 2 magnitudes in terms of the intensity and brightness of the image on the screen. We are now at NGC 591, another galaxy in Andromeda, magnitude 12.9, 1.3 by 1 arc-minute, spiral with a bar, lenticular class, lowercase a, 209 million light years distant, probably about 80,000 light years in diameter. We're at almost 36 degrees declination. We're probably getting about an inch of aperture block, but however, the galaxy is presenting reasonably well given its brightness and on the screen. Okay, taking a break from galaxies, we've now gone to NGC 592, which is an open cluster in Triangulum. This particular open cluster is located within Messier 33. It is a mere 0.3 arc-minutes size, 2.8 million light years distant. We should be getting the entire aperture of the scope on it. You're going to see this open cluster as being a small nebulous cloud looking almost galactic, and I can see it on the screen. There's no indication of its magnitude, however, but if it were a galaxy, I would say it's around magnitude 13.5, if in fact this is our cluster. NGC 593 is a galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 14. Wow. Quite an aspect ratio, 1.2 to 0.2 arc-minutes. That's basically a 6-to-1 aspect ratio, spiral of the lenticular class, 230 million light years away. You might want to take a look at a deep sky imaging of this galaxy if you get a chance. NGC 593, given that beautiful edge-on presentation. It's at minus 12.5 degrees, so we're not getting much of a view of it, and it is magnitude 14. I'm hoping that at least we'll be able to identify it on the screen, even though you're going to have to go online to find a good image of it. NGC 594 is another galaxy in Cetus, magnitude 14, decent aspect ratio, 1.4 to 0.6, spiral with a lowercase bc. 239 million light years distant, puts it at about the size of our own, well, the old size of our own Milky Way, which was 100,000 light years across. We're at minus 16.5 degrees, and the question still remains, by the time we get to 599, will that be a designation for the Triangulum galaxy Messier 33? Here we go with NGC 595, and I can see the core of Messier 33 on the screen to the lower left. 595, however, is a nebula in the galaxy. It's 0.5 arc-minutes in size, elliptical, 2.8 million light years distant. It's at plus 30 and 41 minutes. I think we're getting the full aperture of the scope on it, and that's a welcome sight. However, if you recall images of Messier 33, there were all kinds of luminous nebulosities associated with this galaxy, and it looks like quite a number of them have entered into the Dreyer's catalog on the basis of their being discreetly observed in the past, typically in the late 1700s and 1800s, either by Herschel or some of the large scope followers that trailed him in terms of going deep in the sky looking for the wonders of the cosmos. Here we have a brightish galaxy, NGC596 in Cetus. Magnitude 10.9, 2.8 by 2.1 arc-minute size elliptical of class 2, 76 million light years distant. We're at minus 7 degrees, and at that distance we're basically talking something around 70,000 light years in diameter. The galaxy is quite present on the screen. We're now arriving at NGC 598. You might speculate that NGC 598 is in fact the Triangulum galaxy, of which so many components we've already imaged, at least 4, maybe even 5. The galaxy is not perfectly centered. You can see the core off in the position where we've been seeing most of the galaxies this evening. I do not believe we're getting any obstruction. There is atmospheric water, so we are getting a rather diluted view of the galaxy, but I do want to give it an opportunity to fully develop and to officially give you the data associated with NGC 598, a galaxy in Triangulum, the triangle. It's also known as Messier 33. It's one of the 5 or 6 brightest galaxies. I think it's probably the 5th, but I can't be sure, that visible from Earth. Its magnitude is 5.7, large, 68.7 by 41.6 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a lowercase c. It's obviously quite face-on. It's 2.8 million light years distant. It is at plus 30 degrees, 39 minutes, 36 seconds of declination, 1 degree, 33 minutes, and 50 seconds of right ascension. And there is our view. One we have seen numerous times before, but not as of yet with the scope equatorially flipped looking to the west. The final study in our NGC 550-599 series is, in fact, 599, a galaxy in Cetus. Magnitude 13, face-on, 1.4 by 1.4 arc-minute, spiral of a lenticular class, 242 million light years distant, puts it at about the size of our own Milky Way before it was reestablished, so 100,000 light years in diameter. We're at minus 12 degrees in change in declination. The galaxy is quite present, as we might expect. The screen looks a little bright from my angle. So this is remember, we're losing about a magnitude, well, probably 2 magnitudes in terms of intensity due to its minus 12 degrees in declination location. Now it is up to me to find another study. Hey, let's see if we can turn up NGC 891 to seize the night on. While we are getting a little bit of obstruction from the roof, I think we're getting most of the aperture on NGC 891. It's quite clear. The galaxy's extension, it's about almost 13 degrees, 2 by 13 arc minutes. The lane across its core is quite present. This is not the best view of NGC 891 because we are losing a little bit of aperture, and I would claim that there has been some atmospheric water which has contributed to a little diminution in the views. But I'm looking at this. This is the best view I've seen of 891 since the lunacy began over 2 weeks ago. So I cannot complain And I think it's a fine study to go out on, but I did learn something interesting. NGC 891 is part of the NGC 1024 galaxy family. It's only 30 million light years, well, 29 million light years distant. But let's poke in NGC 1024 and have a look at that, as long as the scope doesn't do an equatorial flip. Otherwise, it's going to be carpe noctem.